Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a deeply tragic, incredibly frustrating story about a family's relentless fight for answers. It's a case where you literally have to ask yourself how the system failed so completely. We're going to map out exactly what happened, how the justice system initially completely turned its back, and the unbelievable perseverance it took to finally uncover a heartbreaking truth. So let's start with a really chilling question, right? How does a 36-year-old mother of four just vanish, especially in a tiny rural town where everybody knows everybody else's business? I mean, we're talking about Collins, Ohio. It's incredibly small, it's remote, and by all accounts, it's remarkably safe. And yet, back in July of 2017, Amanda Dean disappeared without a single trace. 5.5. That's the number to keep in mind here. That represents the excruciating 5.5 years of agonizing silence her family had to endure, over half a decade. For all that time, they were left completely in the dark, holding on to what would ultimately turn out to be false hope, all while the person responsible was just walking free. Part 1. A sudden disappearance in July of 2017. To really understand how those agonizing years even happened, we have to rewind to the very first days she went missing. On July 11th, 2017, Amanda Dean's family realized something was incredibly wrong. You see, Amanda was known to her family as a songbird and a spitfire. She was beautiful, outgoing, high energy, and most importantly, she was a fiercely loving mother to her 4 sons. It was completely unlike her to just abruptly stop contacting her family, and especially her kids. Now, the grim reality of her living situation at the time was deeply concerning. She was staying in this small, almost shed-like cabin on the property of her boyfriend Fred Rear's parents. It was incredibly isolated. I mean, it didn't even have indoor plumbing. But the real red flag here was the deeply troubled relationship she was trapped in. There was a documented history of domestic violence, including one incident where she actually suffered a black eye. Fred was super controlling. He'd frequently break or just take away her phones, which forced Amanda to literally sneak texts to her sister Shannon only when Fred was fast asleep. So the alarm bells really start ringing when Amanda's sister Shannon gets this super ominous text message from Fred's mother, Wren. It just read, "No Amanda in the cabin, and I hope she's okay." That was it. Shannon knew right then and there no way her sister would just pack up and leave her kids behind. The family didn't wait around. They immediately went straight to the local sheriff's office to file a missing person report. Part 2. The safe house illusion and false hope. What should have been a standard, by-the-book investigation immediately hit this bizarre and honestly devastating roadblock. The family is called into the Huron County Sheriff's Office, and they're fully bracing for the worst. But instead, the sheriff tells them Amanda had been found. He says she's in a safe house, she's being taken care of, and get this, she just didn't want to talk to them. Now, the family, trusting law enforcement like most of us would, initially bought it, but the reality on the ground just didn't match up. Amanda still wasn't reaching out to her beloved kids, and any pleas from the family for more info were completely brushed off. Because the sheriff was so adamant she was safe, he actually went ahead and canceled the BOLO, the be on the lookout order, and completely closed the case. Just like that. Amanda wasn't even in the missing persons database anymore. As the years dragged on, the family realized this story made absolutely zero sense. They started writing letters, formally demanding what you'd call proof of life, essentially saying to the sheriff, look, if you can't prove she's alive, you need to reopen this investigation. And the sheriff? He just completely ignored them. Part 3. Breaking the cold case and finding a new hope. But Amanda's family absolutely refused to back down. After 5 years of just hitting a brick wall with local authorities, they finally looked outward. In December of 2022, an advocacy group called Cleveland Missing stepped up to the plate. They're printing flyers, they're getting the media involved, the whole shebang. And this local pressure finally catches the eye of outside law enforcement. By mid-2023, the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation, the BCI, takes over the case. Boom, things start moving fast. By November, they're executing a full search warrant on the Rear property, bringing in excavators and dogs. And by early 2024, Fred Rear is finally in handcuffs. When you look at what the BCI uncovered, it's just overwhelming circumstantial evidence that the local sheriff had somehow either totally missed or just ignored. For instance, when interviewing Fred's nonverbal autistic brother Paulie, the brother literally visually mimed the murder to investigators. It's chilling. On top of that, witnesses reported going over to Fred's cabin back in July of 2017 and seeing blood everywhere, with Fred right there cleaning up the mess with rags. Oh, and other witnesses saw a massive fire blazing at Fred's burn pile continuously for 4 straight days, right after Amanda vanished. Part 4. The horrifying truth and a confession. Okay, so while that circumstantial evidence was definitely strong enough for an indictment, there was still a massive hurdle. The prosecution didn't have a body, and trying a murder case without a body is a seriously uphill battle. To finally get the truth, they offered Fred what's called a proffer agreement, basically a deal where he'd confess exactly what he did in exchange for a plea deal. And Fred admitted it. He killed Amanda in that shared shock, then he burned her body along with a bloody mattress for days. When her bones wouldn't fully break down, he put them in a bucket and literally dumped her remains off a bridge into a local creek. Investigators actually took the family out to that creek, which gave them this tiny, incredibly somber sense of where she ended up. But no actual remains were ever recovered. Her family put it so tragically in court, saying, "We'll never have our home, we'll never be able to properly bury her because he made sure that we couldn't have nothing." It's just devastating. Fred deliberately destroyed any chance they had for a proper, dignified farewell. Part 5. Justice, Legacy, and Fighting for Change. And this brings us to the incredibly controversial legal outcome of all this. Because of that plea deal required just to get the confession, the murder charge was actually reduced. Let's break this down. He gets 9 years for involuntary manslaughter, 4 years for 2 counts of tampering with evidence, and just 1 single year for gross abuse of a corpse. They run consecutively, so that's 14 years total. For the family, and really for anyone looking at this, it felt like an insulting slap on the wrist. 14 years for a guy who brutally murdered a mother of 4 and then spent days mutilating her body just to hide his crime. And to make matters worse, his behavior in court just rubbed salt in the wound. He sat there showing absolutely zero remorse, just staring totally blankly while the family held up photos of Amanda. But the ultimate insult? That came right after sentencing. Fred actually requested a contact visit so he could hug his mother before going off to prison. I mean, you can't make this up. The painful, devastating irony of Fred asking for a hug from his mom, a privilege he permanently and violently stole from Amanda's 4 kids, it was just an absolute gut punch to every single person in that courtroom. But here is where the Dean family is showing unbelievable strength. They are channeling all of that grief into incredible action. They were absolutely horrified that under Ohio law, the maximum penalty for the unspeakable things Fred did to Amanda's body was just that single year in prison. So they've been working with state reps to pass what they're calling Amanda Dean's Law. This proposed legislation would bump the maximum penalty for gross abuse of a corpse from 1 year up to 8 years in prison. They are fighting tooth and nail to make sure this specific, terrible injustice never happens to another family in Ohio. At that sentencing hearing, Amanda's sister Shannon delivered this incredibly powerful statement that really serves as the emotional core of this whole tragedy. She said, "Fred didn't just take Amanda's life. He destroyed ours." And it's such a stark reminder of the massive blast radius of domestic violence. It doesn't just steal one person's future. It shatters entire families, it leaves kids without parents, and it forces loved ones into a literal lifetime of grief. And that brings us to the end of the explainer, but I want to leave you with something to really think about. Amanda's family fought for almost 6 years against a system that completely ignored them, all just to get justice for a woman who was trapped in a terrible abusive situation. So, how can Amanda Dean's story inspire us to spot the signs of domestic violence in our own communities? And how can we step up and advocate for those whose voices have been completely silenced? Her family's perseverance is such a testament to the power of never, ever giving up. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this truly important story.